We live in a world where we can split atoms, edit genes, and map the structure of distant galaxies, yet still struggle to understand our own purpose. Humanity has never been more advanced, and yet never more lost. We calculate everything: velocity, energy, profit, but few stop to calculate meaning. In all our technology, we still haven't answered the most ancient questions. Why am I here? What am I meant to do? And in that silence, some people begin to feel something else, entirely not confusion, but calling, as if they didn't just arrive on this planet to consume and conform, but to contribute, to remind myself, to lift. Picture this. You're part of a vast, interconnected cosmic system. You don't need wings or a glow to have purpose. What if your existence isn't a coincidence, but part of the grand design of the universe? Your existence, your emotions, your actions, they all affect the world around you. Just like every star, every planet, every particle in the universe influences one another. You may not be a mythological figure, but like every atom, star, and galaxy, you are part of the balance that defines the cosmos. Every component of the universe plays a role, and so do you. And perhaps that's the true role of individuals, not to escape the chaos of existence, but to help recalibrate it in ways we might not yet fully understand. So, what if your presence, like gravity or light, is a fundamental force that ripples through the universe, affecting everything around you? Here's a paradox. We live in an age of unparalleled access to information, with all the data in the world at our fingertips. From terabytes of storage in our pockets to algorithms shaping our thoughts, we still find ourselves questioning our very purpose. We live in an age where we can simulate the very origins of the universe, map the human genome, and even send machines to Mars. Yet so many people express a sense of being adrift. This is an issue that transcends technology itself. It's not about the lack of knowledge, but about the deeper question: are we utilizing the vast potential of our minds, or are we overwhelmed by the very progress we've made? It's a reminder that technology, while advancing at incredible rates, cannot answer the most fundamental questions of human existence. But maybe the question isn't whether you're significant in the vast scale of things, but whether you've misunderstood what significance actually means. You see, in astrophysics, we describe celestial bodies by their mass, distance, and light. But here's the thing. Stars don't exist in isolation. They're part of constellations, galaxies, and systems interacting, influencing, and colliding with one another, just like us. And so, imagine for a moment that your existence is not random. Consider this. You, like a quantum particle in the vast fabric of space-time, are part of something essential. Every element of the universe, from atoms to galaxies, plays a role in shaping what comes next. And you're part of that. Some people might call it intuition, others compassion. But for now, let's give it a name that sounds poetic, but not implausible. Earth Angel. Not a being with wings. Not some disembodied saint floating above the clouds. But a human deeply grounded in the muck and mystery of life, who perhaps carries the emotional frequency of something more evolved. How would we know? How would we measure it? Let's consider not from the lens of mythology or mysticism, but from pattern recognition emotional physics, if you will. Because if Earth Angels exist, then their presence should generate measurable ripples in the emotional energy field of our species. Like gravity waves from a supernova, subtle but undeniable. In physics, light travels faster than anything else we know. But in human experience, things aren't always that straightforward. When facing deep emotional distress, grief, suffering, or despair, the flow of light, or even reason, may not be enough to break through the darkness. Yet, there are individuals whose emotional resilience transcends this. They become a source of light, not through mere happiness, but through an unyielding drive to find meaning, even in the most difficult moments. This isn't a form of denial. Rather, it's a remarkable form of emotional energy, similar to the way stars undergo a process of gravitational collapse to eventually release massive amounts of energy. The physics of emotional resilience, much like the energy released by a dying star, is a powerful force, and it's one that's crucial for the survival of a species. Let's be clear, This isn't about cherubs on greeting cards or winged beings in Renaissance paintings. It's about energy archetypes, frequencies, the idea that certain beings exist not to dominate or control, but to guide. If you've ever felt a connection to something greater, something beyond fantasy, but grounded in reality, it might not be a coincidence. Perhaps it's evolutionary memory. Perhaps it's cosmic DNA. When your heart leaps at stories of sacrifice, when tears rise unprovoked at songs of hope and redemption, what are we really observing? Biology? Or is it the echo of a deeper identity knocking on the door of your awareness? In quantum mechanics, there's a concept called entanglement. When two particles are linked, any change in one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Now, imagine that emotional connections between people might work in a similar way. Just as quantum particles can influence each other over great distances, certain individuals have the ability to affect the emotional state of a room simply by their presence. It's not about delivering a motivational speech or giving advice, it's about the energy they bring into the space. This isn't some mystical phenomenon, it's a tangible scientific principle at work, what we might call emotional resonance. Just like light waves or sound frequencies, these emotional waves are real, measurable forces. You may think you're just being yourself, but in reality, you're affecting the emotional state of those around you. In the study of galaxies, we know that spiral arms like those in our Milky Way move in a kind of organized chaos. They're not rigid, they flow, they curve, they evolve. Likewise, Earth angels rarely fit into rigid societal systems. They find bureaucracy suffocating. They question hierarchies. But still they feel a pull to influence, to help, to change things. It's a paradox. The need to serve without submitting, to lead without dominating. If you've ever wrestled with that tension, it doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware you're wired for impact but allergic to ego. In most economic systems, value is measured by profit. But in ecosystem sand, arguably in human consciousness, value is measured by regeneration. Sustainability, restoration. If your soul feels fulfilled when others are healed, not when you win, that's not a flaw. That's a redefinition of success. That's evolutionary compassion. And if your metric for achievement is how well you've elevated others, then you're not just succeeding biologically, you're succeeding cosmologically. There's a common trait among people who carry light. They rarely ask for it. They give and give until depletion is normalized, until martyrdom becomes identity. But remember, even stars go through death and rebirth. Even galaxies collapse to form something new. So if you struggle to receive, if vulnerability feels foreign, it may be time to rewire that internal equation. Because you are not a battery to be drained, you are a conduit to be recharged. We live in a three-dimensional world, but human consciousness can reach beyond the limits of logic. In sleep, in daydreams, or during creative moments, we access states that transcend ordinary thought. Call them dreams, call them inspirations, or just deep moments of reflection. For many Earth angels, these experiences are more than just abstract ideas. They're vivid, filled with imagery, and often bring a sense of connection as if they're speaking to something deeper inside them. Could it be wishful thinking? Sure. But could it also be echoes from a multidimensional self? Signals bleeding through the veil? That's not pseudoscience, that's a question worth asking. In a world filled with judgment and division, where controversy often takes the spotlight, leading with empathy is an act of evolution. Earth angels don't try to prove others wrong. Instead, they seek to understand why people hurt. While the world argues about who deserves love, they offer it freely. Not because it's fashionable, but because they've learned inclusion is evolution. In the cosmos, survival favors adaptation, and empathy is the most advanced adaptation our species has ever developed. In science, we often value logic and rationality as the primary means of understanding the universe. But the human experience is more complex than binary systems of reasoning. Consider music, art, and poetry. These aren't just efficient ways to communicate. They transcend simple logic. They tap into something deeper, something that resonates on an emotional level rather than just intellectual. If you possess a unique ability, whether through sound, visuals, language, or healing, that can provoke an emotional response, you're engaging in a form of human transmission that goes beyond the cerebral. It's not about explaining the world, it's about evoking something profound in others. This is a form of intelligence that's not always measurable, but it's no less real. Let's return to astrophysics for a moment. When we peer into the night sky, we're not just looking at stars, we're looking at history. Every photon is ancient. Every beam of light is a message from a time long gone. If you often feel that kind of loneliness, not the social kind, but the existential kind, there's a reason. Earth angels often carry memories that span beyond one lifetime. They remember things no one taught them. They crave a world no one else seems to remember. But that ache is sacred. It means you came here with something to give. If you see yourself in these patterns not in a boastful way, but in a deep, quiet sense of knowing, then hear this. Your purpose is not to escape Earth, but to make it better. You are not here to simply seek the light, you are the light. You are not an isolated incident in the vastness of the cosmos. You are part of a larger evolutionary process, a glimpse into what humanity might become if we align ourselves with the fundamental forces of nature. So, move through this world with humility, make decisions with wisdom, and act with intention. Because within you, between the atoms that make up your body and the stardust embedded in your very being, lies a force placed by the universe not by random chance, but by the laws of physics and the intricate design of existence. And the world, whether it knows it or not, has been waiting for you. There's something remarkable about those who seem to radiate positivity, not because they are immune to adversity, but because they persist in the face of it, even when the world seems overwhelming. We live in an era where emotional distress is common, fueled by the pressures of modern life and the constant bombardment of information. Yet, amidst the noise and chaos, some individuals seem to find a way to guide others towards clarity, to uplift those around them, all while quietly managing their own burdens. From a scientific perspective, we might consider this as a form of emotional resilience. Neuroscience might call it emotional regulation, and evolutionary biology could frame it as kin selection, where helping others is a survival strategy. In a broader context, however, this speaks to a deeper force within human nature, an adaptive ability to maintain psychological stability and foster connections, essential for the survival of both individuals and communities. In astrophysics, we study dark energy, the invisible force accelerating the universe's expansion. It can't be directly seen, only inferred by its effect on everything else. Similarly, you may never see the inner strength of someone carrying light through darkness, but you'll know it by its influence. It moves people, it opens hearts, it expands hope. And if that describes you, if you've become the gravitational counterforce to despair without ever asking for recognition, then perhaps you weren't meant to collapse under pressure. Perhaps, like a dying star going supernova, you were meant to illuminate the path forward even as you transform. Now let's consider something more subtle and internal magnetism that pulls you towards symbols and stories of angels, but not in the caricatured commercial sense. Not halos or harps, not folklore, something deeper, something visceral. This draw isn't aesthetic, it's biological, it's electromagnetic, in the emotional sense, resonance. In quantum physics, two particles entangled across vast distances can react to one another in perfect harmony. You don't need to be in the same time or space to recognize a signature frequency. So, what happens when your spirit responds to the archetype of the guide, the healer, the protector not out of fantasy, but from something that feels like ancestral memory? You may not be remembering something you were told. You might be remembering something you were, that instinctive pull, that emotional reverberation when you see angelic imagery or hear music that feels like a reunion with the sky. It's not proof, but it is evidence. Evidence that your emotional body remembers a home not found on maps and a purpose not listed on resumes. Let's talk about energy, specifically yours. Some people seem to change the temperature of a room without uttering a word. Their presence, calm and grounded, lifts moods, dissolves tension, and rebalances chaos into coherence. They don't force positivity, they generate it. We see similar dynamics in electromagnetic fields. The Earth's magnetic field, though invisible, protects all life from solar radiation. It doesn't shout, it shields, it doesn't announce its presence. It is presence. So too, with certain human beings, their nervous systems are calibrated not just for their survival, but for collective equilibrium. When someone leans on you emotionally without realizing why, when others feel safe to be vulnerable around you, it's not because you have answers. It's because your presence feels like resonance instead of resistance. You may think it's nothing, but in a world dominated by friction, harmony is revolutionary. This is not a trait you earned, it is a field you emanate. There's a curious paradox about those who come to Earth with the deepest sense of mission. They often resist asking for help, not out of arrogance, but out of wiring. There's something in their core that defaults to service, that assumes the role of supporter, counselor, guide. And yet, in the great balance of thermodynamics, even stars must intake energy to sustain their luminosity. In astrophysics, no system can emit endlessly. Without input, it violates the laws of conservation. But human beings try, especially those who carry the energy we might call Earth Angel. You see, the most compassionate often confuse giving with being. They don't merely give love, they are love, expressed in human form. But here lies the tension. Even a pulsar, spinning and sending radio waves across light years, eventually slows without fuel. Even the most magnetic presence needs to be seen, to be held, to be allowed to receive. And yet, if you've always hesitated when help is offered, if it feels unnatural to lean on others, if support feels like foreign territory, you're not broken. You're just used to standing at the edge, guarding the emotional perimeter for others. But remember, even the guardians need shelter. Even the protectors need protecting. Then there's this, a longing for purpose that can't be satisfied by paychecks or praise. You followed the script. You climbed ladders, hit milestones, gathered achievements like constellations on a personal resume, and still, something gnaws at you, a hunger, not of the stomach, but of the soul. If your professional life feels like a successful misalignment, if accolades ring hollow when they're not tied to service, you're not alone. Many Earth Angels reach a crossroads, a point when the gravity of their internal truth overtakes the inertia of external success. And at that juncture, it no longer matters what the salary is if the soul feels unpaid. In economic terms, this may look irrational. In cosmic terms, it's perfectly logical. Because what is the purpose if not alignment with one's unique frequency in the symphony of humanity? You're not chasing worth, you're searching for resonance. And that resonance rarely lives in profit margins. It lives in contribution. It lives in healing. It lives in helping the Earth awaken from its slumber into something more humane, more luminous. If you've ever given up a prestigious position or walked away from comfort in pursuit of calling, if you've risked the known for the meaningful, you're not failing. You're remembering. And what of those who uplift without even trying? Whose mere presence diffuses stress like a cool breeze, shifts the temperature of a heavy summer day? These are the unsung emotional architects of our world. They don't command attention, they calibrate energy. When people say, I don't know why, but I feel better around you, what they're really saying is, your frequency brings me home. It's not a charm. It's not charisma. It's coherence. A naturally tuned signal that resonates with emotional truth. In radio astronomy, we detect faint signals from billions of light years away because of their unique repeating patterns. They're not loud, but they're clear. Likewise, you may not be trying to lift others, but you do. Like a tuning fork that brings a room of dissonant instruments back into harmony, your vibration aligns those around you, not by effort, but by essence. And in a noisy world, such clarity is sacred. If you've ever found that your silence speaks louder than other speeches, that your presence soothes even in conflict, then consider this. Your being is the message. Dreams, we often dismiss them as the subconscious filing cabinet of the brain, a place where stress gets sorted, where memories remix themselves into incoherent theater. But what if, for some people, dreams aren't just psychological echoes, but portals, bridges between what is and what could be? For Earth angels, dreams are rarely random. They're transmissions. They carry architecture, geometry, light, conversations with unseen companions who feel more like family than fiction. Neuroscience might explain the theta states, the memory consolidation, the emotional processing, but science also tells us that not all signals are noise. In quantum physics, we study signals from deep space, filtering out the noise to uncover patterns. In a similar way, some people filter their dreams or thoughts, finding direction in the clarity that remains. These dreams often carry emotional signatures that the dreamer has never experienced in waking life feelings of profound peace, sacred recognition, or a call to action that transcends logic. If you've ever woken up from a dream with clarity, with a mission, with tears of memory you can't place, perhaps you weren't just dreaming. Perhaps you were remembering the briefing, because maybe your soul didn't fall asleep. It reconnected. And what of your relationship with the world, with its messiness, its contradictions, its people? There's something beautifully rebellious about individuals who refuse to write others off, who continue to see humanity in those societies as discarded. In evolutionary psychology, we are told that humans are tribal, that we bond with sameness and reject the unfamiliar. But Earth angels challenge this equation. They are allergic to exclusion. They sense that division is a virus and empathy is the cure. When others judge, they listen. When others recoil, they lean in. And not because it's easy, but because they've known what it's like to be unseen. The physics of empathy is not measurable in labs, but it's undeniable in lives. Inclusion isn't a policy for theme, it's a frequency, a resonance that says every being matters, that no one should be left outside the circle of compassion. And perhaps that's because they remember what it's like to come from dimensions where judgment doesn't exist, only learning, where identity is fluid and all experience is sacred. If you find yourself drawn to the wounded, the marginalized, the forgot not to save them, but to simply sit beside them, then your angelic nature is already in motion. You don't fix people, you see them. Then there are the gifts, the inexplicable talents that flow through some people as if channeled, not learned. You might write with a depth that surpasses your age. You might create music that seems to bypass logic and speak directly to the soul. You may find healing flows through your touch, your words, your silence. These are not talents in the conventional sense, they are transmissions. In astrophysics, we often detect celestial phenomena not by observing them directly, but by the waves they produce a radiation, X-rays, gravitational distortions. Likewise, your gifts are not about you. They are the ripples you create in the emotional fabric of others. If you've ever felt like a conduit rather than a creator, if you lose yourself in your art only to realize others found themselves in it, you're not imagining things. You're translating frequencies. Earth angels don't create to impress. They create to remind humanity of something it forgot. That beauty is a message. And every time you write, paint, sing, or simply sit with presence, you're dialing people back into that message. You're not just creative. You are a carrier wave for the divine. And then there is the ache, the paradoxical experience of being surrounded by people, yet feeling like no one quite understands you. The feeling of being home everywhere and nowhere. This is the most quietly devastating mark of an Earth angel, existential solitude. Not because you're antisocial, but because your soul spans timelines. You carry the memory of stars, of lifetimes not bound to this calendar or this century. It is not a flaw, it is a signal. In cosmology, we study background radiation, the faint residual energy of the Big Bang, still echoing through space. It tells us something monumental happened, something ancient, and it still speaks. Earth angels carry something similar, the background radiation of where they came from. You may feel misunderstood, not because you're too much, but because you're too early. A preview of what humanity is becoming, not what it's been. And that ache, that sense of floating between worlds, it's not loneliness, it's a legacy. It means you remember something this world is still learning. And that ache is not your burden, it's your compass. Earth, you are here to elevate it. You did not come to search for the light. You are the light. You are not an exception. You are a prototype, a finely tuned glimpse of what humanity becomes when it remembers how to harmonize, how to heal, and how to unify. So walk humbly, but recognize your own worth. Speak gently, but never water down your truth. Because in all the vastness of the universe, there has never been anyone quite like you. And that in itself may be the most remarkable fact of all. So if you felt the pull subtle, persistent, beyond logic that you're here not just to exist, but to elevate, believe it, not because it's comforting, but because the world needs anchors of light more than ever. You weren't sent to fix everything. You were sent to be something that reminds others who they are. And that is not small work. That is cosmic in scale. Like gravity, it's invisible but undeniable, quiet but world-shaping. You don't need a title, formal recognition, or permission to make a difference. You don't need all the answers. What you need is to keep going, to continue contributing in a world that often struggles to find its way. In a universe governed by randomness and uncertainty, the most extraordinary thing might just be a human who chooses to engage with the world, not in search of validation, but driven by the fundamental forces of curiosity, compassion, and connection.